I recently hit 18,000 subs, and to celebrate, today we're doing a Q&A. Hi guys, I hope you're all doing really well. My name is Sarah and welcome to What the Horror, the channel where we talk about horror movies old and new. So yeah, today's episode is going to be a little bit different, something which I've not done before, but seeing as how I recently hit 18,000 subs, I thought it would be a good way for you to get to know me a little bit better as your What the Horror host, but also for me to get to know you a little better, see some more of my subs' names and see what interests you. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these questions. Are you going to do collab videos or stick on your own? This is a good one to start on because I am actually currently working on another collab video. It's all filmed and in the editing stages, but I needed a little more time than a week to edit it. And so that is actually another reason why I'm making this episode this week. Okay, next, I've put these two together because, I put these two together because they're quite similar. What are the J-horror or K-horror movies that you like, and what are some of your favourite foreign horror films? I absolutely love Asian horror films. A lot of you will know that Ringu is one of my favourite horror films of all time, but that love came from it traumatising me when I first watched it. It wasn't love at first sight, that's for sure. But out of that grew this fascination with J-horror. You know that feeling of you can't not look at something horrific, being fascinated by what scares you. As far as others I love, I would say Battle Royale for sure, really good one. Pulse, Gonjiam Haunted Asylum, A Tale of Two Sisters. And while it isn't technically a horror, it does have horror elements to it, and that is The Call from 2020, I believe. If you haven't seen that one, I would highly recommend it. I haven't really seen any other types of horror film. I haven't seen any French, Italian or Spanish, although I do really want to watch The Orphanage, which is a Spanish one, I believe. It depends on what you class as foreign. To some people, British horror would be foreign. So in that case, I would say The Wicker Man and Shaun of the Dead. And if you class Australian as foreign, then I recently watched Rogue, a crocodile horror film, and that one was really, really good. It was by the same people who did Wolf Creek, but I much preferred Rogue. What movie, show or book started your love of horror? And another one, what is your first memory of horror movies? I wish I had a perfect answer for you with this one, all wrapped up in a neat bow, but the truth is, I can't remember which specific book or film got me into horror. I've just always loved it for as long as I can remember. So I can't pinpoint a moment where there was an epiphany of I love horror. I've just always been that spooky kid, and I watched and read stuff that was age appropriate, which then grew and changed and developed as I grew and changed. I suppose when I was really little, the Addams Family had a huge impact on me. I was Wednesday Addams for pretty much every Halloween for years on end, and I actually always got told by people when I was younger that I looked just like Christina Ricci's Wednesday, and I even so far as to say that I was in France once, and I even got stopped by a random French person who just wanted to tell me that I looked like her. As far as a first memory, I don't really have one, as I say, but I do have significant memories. So I remember watching I Know What You Did Last Summer as a teenager with my friend and experiencing the fun of watching a horror film socially and sharing that fear, especially as we had kind of a little event that scared us immediately after watching the film. So that's a significant memory. And I remember watching Ringu and experiencing just how terrifying horror can be at times and the power that it can have over you. And I remember watching my mum prepare to watch a horror film, the ceremony of it and the excited anticipation. And it really stood out to me as a child that watching a horror film was something really special and a moment to be savoured and enjoyed. Okay, what are some of your hobbies and interests outside of horror? There are things outside of horror? I'm only kidding. Outside of horror, I love music. I'm always listening to music. It's a bigger percentage of my day spent listening to music than not. It's kind of weird. But that's, whether it's on Spotify or on my vinyls. I do like to collect vinyls. I love to read, but I go through phases of reading. Sometimes I get in a reading slump. Sometimes I just want to read fiction. Sometimes I just want to read non-fiction. And I love history. I read and watch a lot of things to do with history. I'm a big believer in it being important to know where you've come from, know the mistakes that we've made as a race and why certain things are the way they are. I just love to learn. I like learning either new things or expanding on what I already know. And you'll notice that there is actually quite a history element to the channel, especially in the truly horror episodes. And, that's by design because it's combining two of my loves. And I also love to go for walks in nature. If I'm not watching a film or listening to music, then I'm usually walking in the woods by a lake or a reservoir. And I'm quite lucky that I live not too far from a canal, so me and my friend will often go for a cycle along them, which is really nice. Clears the mind, blows the cobwebs off. Sip of tea, I think. Okay, next question. Oh, I've put two here together that are quite similar. What made you decide to do a YouTube channel about this genre? And would you consider adding other genres later down the line? And how long did you take to prepare for your first episode? Logo, format, equipment, etc. Okay, so I decided to do YouTube because at the time I was in a job that was making me miserable. Like really, really miserable. And while I cared about the job itself, it was very worthwhile. It was affecting my health in a really, really bad way. And I wanted to take control of the situation and do something that I felt passionate about, that would teach me new skills, challenge me, and that was a creative outlet and hopefully something that, I would enjoy and make me happy. I've always wanted to work around films, and so this seemed like a perfect way that I could take control of and make happen. And I chose this genre because I didn't want to make a channel for the sake of it. I wanted to make one for something that I actually knew something about, and that to a point, I know what I'm talking about. And I think that people can tell when there is insincerity in what you're creating, if you're creating for the sake of it or for money. And I wanted to create content that I would want to watch myself. I mean, I love horror. I spend a lot of my time watching horror, thinking about it, researching it, trying to find someone who will listen to me talk about it. So, it just made sense. I had actually decided to make my channel a year before I did it, but I spent most of that following year telling myself that it was a silly idea and something that I wouldn't be able to do. But eventually, I figured that I definitely wouldn't be able to do it if I never tried. But if I did try, then hey, who knows, maybe someone would want to watch what I make. I already did photography, so I had some of the equipment. I bought some pieces that were missing, like editing software and a microphone, just the bare basics. I used my phone for the first few months, just while I got a feel for it. I picked a name, What the Horror, which comes from a phrase that I tend to say a lot every day, and I just replaced one of the words with horror. And I worked with a graphic designer that I knew on the logo because I knew that I wanted to go into it already branded. I picked a film, perhaps not the best one to start with, but hey, you live and you learn. I wrote a script and I spent a few weeks editing it, which, let me tell you, was a test of my skills and my patience. The air was blue in this house for those few weeks. There was tears and tantrums and a lot. Editing videos is very different to editing photos. Starting from scratch felt really quite overwhelming in the beginning. There's so much to learn, but I just tried to break it down step by step. I would say overall it took me between 6 to 8 weeks to get everything sorted from start to release. But if I'm honest, maybe it took a little more than 6 to 8 weeks. I did hide in procrastination and research for a while in the beginning, out of nerves. But yeah, I would say that was about the window. Okay, again, two that were quite similar. Do you have a favourite genre? And what are your favourite subgenres of horror? And are there any movies you will not watch? As far as subgenres go, I like haunted house films and hauntings in general, whether it's ghosts or demons. films like The Shining, the Insidious films, the Conjuring films, the others, that's a really good one. Some of the Paranormal Activity films, and I think that I like them because that's what scares me, ghosts and the supernatural. And there aren't many horror films that scare me anymore, so I know that I can always rely on a good ghost movie to give me a good scare. I also actually really like tech horror, like Ring You, Cam, Pulse, One Missed Call, and while it's not fully horror, I would say Upgrade as well. That doesn't get enough love. But I also love the Terminator films, and I think that I just enjoy the exploration of the dangers of technology. I also love a good creature feature like Jaws, Deep Blue Sea, The Descent, A Quiet Place, and I don't know if you'll allow the Alien films as a creature feature or if they're just alien horror, but the first two Alien films. They don't even have to be a good film for me to watch them as far as creature features go. I think that it's tying into my fear of being eaten alive. It's that thing again of you can't not look at something that horrifies you. And of course I do enjoy a slasher. Not all of them. I'm quite fussy with slashers, to be honest, because I've mentioned it before that I get pretty bored in the third act and the final girl circuit, but I do love Scream. I love Scream a lot, and I Know What You Did Last Summer, Psycho, Sleepaway Camp, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, and My Bloody Valentine, the original. And there are a few of the more elevated horror, highbrow horrors that I love, like Hereditary and The Lighthouse. I think they're really good. As far as there not being any films I will not watch, I mean, that's just opening up a can of worms, isn't it? As there's always going to be someone who loves the film that you're saying you don't want to watch, and it's easy to offend people or make them think you're not a true horror fan because you won't watch so-and-so. But I can safely say that I will never watch a Serbian film, ever, and probably not Cannibal Holocaust or Green Inferno. And I don't watch films with SA in them, like Last House on the Left, I Spit on Your Grave, Revenge. However, I don't judge people who do watch them and enjoy them. It is, of course, always personal preference, and I don't think anyone should be attacked for which films they do or don't watch, because you don't know the reasoning behind their choices. Okay, next question. If you could meet one horror director, who would it be? Leigh Whannell. I just love him. He's not necessarily my favourite horror director of all time, but he is a fave. And I think that there are times where you can love a creation and not necessarily the creator. And so in terms of meeting, I'd want it to be someone I think I could get on with, share interests with, and who would actually be nice to meet. And for me, that would be Leigh Whannell. He's creative, he's very funny, and he seems intelligent and very down to earth. And I think that we'd get on, as he has quite a sharp tongue and dark humour like I do. If not Whannell, then it would be Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright. He's also one of my favourite creators, but also seems really interesting and just a genuinely nice guy. And I tend to favour directors who have written and directed a film, as I think you get a truer sense of the story. And I would love to talk to them both about each creative stage. Plus, Edgar Wright has impeccable music taste and utilises it to perfection in his films, so I think we'd bond over that. I think we'd bond over music. Okay, next question. All-time favourite horror movie? This is an impossible one to answer. It's one I've tried to figure out not my whole life, but most of my life, and I just can't. And I think it's because there are too many wonderful horror movies and too many movies that I love for different reasons. I have films that I love because of how good they are technically, because of how they made me feel, but I also have films I love because of nostalgia and sentimentality, especially the ones I used to watch as a teen and a young adult. But if you're really going to push me, and to name a few, I would say Scream, Psycho, and I Know What You Did Last Summer for sentimental reasons. Pearl and Barbarian for recent releases. I thought they were incredible. Jaws, The Shining, Hereditary, and Aliens for how technically wonderful they are. Ring You and The Descent for how scary they are. And some recent discoveries that I recently watched and just fell in love with would be the original Wicker Man, Sleepaway Camp, and The Ritual. Okay, next question. As I was blown away by Ghost's cover of Stay, what songs from horror flicks stick with you and what are your favourite horror soundtracks? I believe music can add so much to a horror film. You and me both. Like I said, I love music and I love music in movies. I loved the Ghost cover of Stay as well. I will admit I felt quite emotional sat there in the cinema listening to it after the film, and I'm regularly playing it in this house, and I couldn't agree more about the music adding to the film. I believe that films and TV shows, if you removed their scores and soundtracks, they wouldn't be half the production they are. If you think about it, they are purposely designed and curated to create certain emotions and feelings within us, so you're bound to have a connection to them. I love to listen to movie and TV show scores, especially if I'm writing or editing. They're a great backing track, but also I think there is a score or soundtrack for every person and every mood. Some of my favourite horror soundtracks are Psycho, Scream and Saw for the score, but I also love The Lost Boys and The Crow because of the songs that they use. But there are other songs that have stuck with me, like you say. I loved Stay by Ghost, but also Hunter's Moon that they did for Halloween Kills. And Stan's Letter from It Chapter 2 always makes me cry. I love the cover of Summer Breeze by Typo Negative in I Know What You Did Last Summer. I think that's a great one. And then also Lizzie's cover of Rob Zombie's Dragula from the film Home. Another great one. And while I didn't like the film itself, Army of the Dead, its opening song is pretty awesome. It's a cover of Elvis's Viva Las Vegas, but it's done by Richard Cheese and Alison Crow, I believe. Okay, which horror movie would you be most terrified to be thrust into? That's a really good one. Anything where there is something that could eat you, like a shark movie or a crocodile movie. I know there are far worse films to be put in, one's far scarier, but I find the idea of being eaten alive terrifying. It doesn't just scare me, but it also freaks me out. When I made my Truly Horror episode on Jaws, I got so wigged out by it just by reading and researching the real shark attacks that inspired it. I can't explain it. It just gave me the creeps. I hate it. But perhaps something like 28 Days Later or 28 Weeks Later would be worse, because at least you can avoid the animal by just not going into their habitat. Just don't go into the water. But I'm not sure you could escape fast-running zombies. So yeah, maybe one of those. Okay, next one. Favourite horror movie monsters. I mean, there's so many to choose from, and for different reasons. But I'd say that my favourite horror movie monster or villain is definitely Ghostface. I love the whodunit aspect of the character, as well as the overall look and aesthetic. Plus, the fact that Ghostface is clumsy, I think it's this wonderful contradiction of someone so scary yet fallible. I also really like a lot of the classic monsters, like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein's monster, and in particular the Mummy. I have this thing about the Mummy. I love to watch every version that I can find, and I think it's the ancient Egypt aspect. But I mean, obviously, the best Mummy is the Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz Mummy. I mean, that thing is life-changing. Obviously, Sadako has to get a mention, as she scared the bejesus out of me, and the Xenomorph as well. What an incredible, gorgeous creature design. And who doesn't love Bruce the Shark? Well, me, I suppose. And yet I do. To be honest, there are so many that, thinking about it, maybe I'll dedicate a whole episode to different horror monsters that I love and the reasons why. Like the funniest, the best ones for the way they look, the ones I think are the most effective killers, something like that. If you're interested in an episode like that dedicated to different monsters, then let me know. That's a good question. Okay, next question. What is your opinion on movie directors putting hidden meanings and allegory into almost every frame and scene of the film? Specifically Ari Aster and Jordan Peele. I think it's a great way to make the movies more interesting to discuss afterwards, but sometimes I find it distracting. That's another good question. For me personally, I like the hidden meanings and messages. I mean, I spend a lot of time focusing on them for the channel, taking a deep dive into the hidden messages and meanings. And for me, on a personal level, I like the puzzle aspect of it, how it forces you to use your brain a little bit more. But I will say that I appreciate it when a movie has multiple layers, so you can just enjoy it for what it is at surface level, and then if you then choose to, you can dig a little deeper into it. What I'm not sure I'm on board with is when a series of films that have never used hidden meanings before then start including them because they see other films having success with it, and they then try to emulate that success. Themes and meanings have their place, but the simpler popcorn fun also has its place. So I don't know if that's a silly thing to say because films can always grow and evolve, but if you're doing it simply for the success and it doesn't feel organic in your film, then don't do it. But as far as if that's what you've set out to do, then yeah, I'm on board with it. I like it. I love Jordan Peele's films and I love Ari Aster's films. And you know, when I did the Paymon episode last year with Zizi, it was wonderful to watch the film so minutely and pick out so many details and nuances and things like that, that I really had such a growth in my appreciation of the film for understanding all these tiny little bits. So yeah, for me, I like them. Okay, next question. Congratulations on 18k. What is your favourite non-horror movie right now? And if you could visit any place in the world, where would it be and why? First of all, thank you very much. If you mean non-horror for recent films, then I would say that the new Mission Impossible film is fantastic. I'm also still obsessed with last year's Top Gun Maverick. And I also really loved Elvis from last year. I love how Baz Luhrmann uses music in his films in equal level to the dialogue to communicate things. And the Tupelo hayride scene in particular, I could just watch on a constant loop. I think it's wonderful. If you mean older and just sort of favourites in general, then I'd say Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg's Hot Fuzz, or pretty much most Alfred Hitchcock films. As for visiting places, I've already seen Spain, France, Greece, Switzerland, Portugal, Wales, Scotland and Ireland, but I would love to go to Australia, Japan, as I think that the gardens there are just beautiful. And when I developed my interest and fascination with J-horror, I also developed a fascination just with Japanese culture in general, everything to do with it. I thought it was just so beautiful and interesting. So yeah, that would be a good one. And some parts of America, not all of it, just some parts of it, for different reasons. And even though I have been to different parts of France, I've never been to Paris, and I really want to see Notre Dame. And I've also heard that Croatia is really, really beautiful. I mean, it looks beautiful in Game of Thrones, so yeah, those. Okay, next question. Again, two quite similar that I've put together. Aside from horror movies, do you also read horror books or stories? And I would like to know why you love horror so much and since when. And are you into other stuff like horror books or games, and are you considering to stream a horror game? So yeah, I watch some horror TV shows like The Walking Dead, or I did up until season 7 or 8 or something like that, and then I just got too angry at what they had done to this masterpiece of a show. I've also dipped into American Horror Story. I do play video games, but I've not played many horror ones, so as of right now it's pretty unlikely that I will stream playing them, but I mean, you know, never say never. Who knows what the future holds. I do read horror books, both fiction and non-fiction. I recently read a young adult one called Gallant by V.E. Schwab, which was a pretty cool ghost story. And I've got Anno Dracula by Kim Newman on my to-read list, which is a crossover between Dracula and Jack the Ripper murders. So I'm beyond excited about that one. I have this weird morbid fascination with the Jack the Ripper murders, so yeah, I'm really interested in this one. But I'm not reading that yet because I've just started Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I know, call yourself a horror fan and you've not even read Frankenstein. But I was holding off because I finally bought myself a copy of those gorgeous I'll put in a picture here somewhere of those gorgeous penguin cloth-bound classics. And if you can ever find yourself one for a reasonable price or can afford the full price, invest in them because they're wonderful. They've got so much extra information and essays and deep dives and looking into the hidden themes of it. So yeah, I'm excited about that one. For why I love horror, I mean, I love horror for many, many reasons. There's something within me that naturally gravitates towards the dark, the gothic, and the bizarre. I've just always been attracted to that, and so I think it's just a natural relationship between me and horror movies or me and horror books. I think as well that horror is such a wonderful, healthy way to explore your own fears and your own emotions. And I think, it's this wonderful, safe, curated environment for you to experience fear and anxiety and, these extreme emotions that you perhaps wouldn't want to feel in everyday life or do feel in everyday life, but don't have an outlet to, fix it or make it go away. And I think in horror you have that. It's can be an adrenaline rush as well. Like, why do people ride roller coasters? It's that extreme high or that extreme feeling. I think that horror can provide that. And I also think that horror is one of the most beautiful forms of media and art, especially when it comes to film. I think that horror is the genre that can experiment and express itself freely more than any other genre. It's not as restricted like comedies or rom-coms by the blueprints and the structures. I think that they can break the mold, try new things, and they have more of a freedom to comment on things that are happening in the world and current fears of societies, than any other film does. And I also think that the horror community is unlike any other horror community. I know that people have had bad experiences within it, but I count myself lucky that I haven't yet. I've just met wonderful people who share this love. I love horror for different reasons, and those reasons have added and changed as I have got older. I don't know if that made any sense, but it seems like a good one to end on. Tiring work talking about yourself. So a huge thank you to everyone who asked me a question. I apologise if I didn't answer yours, but I didn't want the episode to be too long and there were so many great ones. So what I've done is I've kept the ones I didn't answer, and when I hit 19k, if I ever hit 19k, bit of an assumption there, but if I do, then I'll do another Q&A. Or if this one does really well actually and you guys just want me to answer the other questions, if you want a Q&A part 2 before 19k, maybe I'll do that. But either way, part 2 or 19k, I will answer the other questions then. I've wanted to do an episode like this for quite a while now, or at least something to mark the channel's growth. But honestly, every time I hit a certain number, I wouldn't have time to make something before I then hit the next milestone, the next 1,000. Hitting 18,000 and needing extra time for next week's episode made it feel like the perfect time. Also, a couple of the questions were so good that I think I can get an entire episode out of it. Like the favourite monsters. There was another one, what are bad movies that you love and what are great movies that you didn't like? So I might do an episode and list a few of those, but only if you guys are interested, so let me know in the comments. And of course, a huge, massive, big, gigantic thank you to everyone who congratulated me on hitting 18,000 and to everyone who got me here, for watching and for commenting, and I appreciate all of you and the support that you give me and the channel. It allows me to do something that I love doing so much and to meet people with the same love of horror. If you're not already subscribed, then don't forget to hit that button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out on the next episode, because it's a good one. It's a fun one. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye.